Hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining me.
How you doing, Max? Good to see you.
Hey, man. So, we talked a bit just before about a couple of topics, and maybe I want to start somewhere else. How did the relationships that you have, like the one with Michael Saylor, change your view of the world and how you operate in the world?
Yeah, good question, mate. Just a supercharged descent down the rabbit hole. So I started the podcast in 2020, and I'd already been in the Bitcoin rabbit hole for a good handful of years up until that point. And I'd seen the crazy ICO stuff. I didn't really understand what was going on, and I saw Bitcoin Cash, and I still didn't really understand what was going on, and I saw the ICOs, and for me, I was just being bombarded with all of this noise and no signal back in those days, and I was still in the kind of mindset of one day I'll be able to cash out of my Bitcoin for a lot of money. I hadn't made that mindset switch. And it wasn't until probably 2019 that it all started coming together. And big credit, first of all, to Andreas Antonopoulos and the early people that were out there doing the education that helped me find Bitcoin in the first place, Tur de Meester, Trace Mayer. I mean, unfortunately, we've lost two of those big names. Tur's still with us. Please, Tur, don't turn. He's such a shining light. And then finding people like Giacomo, and then finding, Bitcoin Twitter was such an incredible resource as well. People like Bitstein, Pierre Rochard, and then finding Safe and his work. Funnily enough, even American Hodl, right? People like that who were on Twitter, who were unwavering and would just call the bullshit out every single time. That's what really started making me sit up and take notice. And then 2019, all of the articles started dropping as well. Breedlove come onto the scene with some incredible work, like Masters of Slaves and Money and Bitcoin and the Number Zero. Gigi's writing. Obviously, I've mentioned Safe's book as well. And that was like, whoa, okay, hang on. Something is happening inside my brain. Andy Edstrom's book was very pivotal as well. Jan Pritzker's, Kalle Rosenbaum's. All of these books just started appearing. Knut Svanholm, bam, there's another book. And it just seemed to me that I had all of this information and nobody was listening to me, and I needed to share it with somebody. So how did I do that? How should I do that? How could I do that? And my natural fit was to start a podcast. I'd had a little bit of experience interviewing people in the past for homeschooling summits. And I figured, well, why don't I just, carry that skill set into Bitcoin and see if anybody listens. And I released the first couple of episodes, and 300 to 500 people were tuning in. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. This is absolutely nuts. And then we got locked down. And I thought, whoa, this was the worst time to start a podcast. But in fact, it was the best time to start a podcast because everybody had a shit ton of time on their hands. So I started sending out emails or DMs to the authors that I wanted to get on and discuss their books. And they were all more than happy to come on the show and discuss them. And that really, the books are one thing. They can open your mind in one way, but then conversations with that person and getting deeper into the topic and what they're thinking was mind blowing. And I would record these episodes and I just couldn't wait to get them out. I was almost right, that was incredible. The most incredible conversation I've ever had in my life. I just got to ship it. Let's go. And I really loved doing it. And that was 3.5 years ago. And of course, every time you get exposed to people such as Michael Saylor, such as Jeff Booth, such as Preston Pish, these people I never thought I'd ever have had any kind of interaction with at all. It certainly changes you. It gives you, I would say, more confidence to go out and interact with absolutely anybody, to not fear the no, to be able to sit there and, hold your stead in a conversation with, these people, some of these people you'd seen on television, right? You see them on television, you're like, oh, wow. But that's a 2.5 minute clip. And the news anchor asks them some throwaway questions and then they're gone. You got to sit down and have a 2-hour conversation with these people, right? Make yourself and on their level. Not waste their time and show respect for their time, and then do the best job that you can to present their work, with the recording and get that out to as many people as you possibly can as well. So there's certainly a sense of responsibility that goes with it. But I would say overall, it just sped up my education, my learning curve, and gave me a sense of belonging within the Bitcoin space, because we are all battling with imposter syndrome. Every single one of us at any point of our career, at any point of our life. And to have released those first few episodes. And I remember I go back and listen to some of the early ones sometimes. Just I honestly, even though I was 44 at the time, it sounded like a kid. I've grown so much, and that is by virtue of the podcast and with the exposure to these people that have helped me along the way. But that's not to say they're not facing their own imposter syndrome. Andy Edstrom wasn't expecting to write a book about Bitcoin. He was just a financial advisor living on the West Coast, having a great life. Bitcoin taps him on the shoulder, and all of a sudden, bam, he has a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to his clients that he's been looking after for God knows how many years, to explain Bitcoin to them. So how can he do that? Well, he does that in more of a professional way rather than just a newsletter that goes out on an email. He presents it in a book. Huge imposter syndrome. So we're all facing it. So anybody that's listening or watching this now, I know what you're feeling. You want to add value to this space, but something is blocking you. There's a barrier to entry, and you don't know why. Because it is this imposter syndrome. It's the monkey mind in your head telling you you're not good enough to explain this. You don't have the knowledge. You'll never be able to reach the right people. You might write a book, no one's ever going to buy it. You might write an article, no one's ever going to read it. You might release a podcast, no one's ever going to listen to it. This is going around in your mind the whole time. But it's up to us as Bitcoiners to kind of draw that line in the sand with that monkey in your mind and say, no, fuck you. I'm shipping something and I'm going to add value to this space. And when you step up and you do add value in some way, the right people within the space will find you and your work and then elevate you and help you.
Very interesting stuff. A couple thoughts I had on the way. Similarities to how I started with this, basically just wanted good conversations, right? I moved to a very quiet kind of environment 2.5 years ago during COVID. And since then, I wasn't really talking to anybody, usually always out and about. And I thought, okay, let's be, clearly a selfish decision, on one hand. And then on the other, it's the same as you said before, I just want to give value, right? I've been across the world for many years, and I've seen some stuff, maybe, not interesting for a lot of people, but maybe there's a few, that can learn something from it. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And obviously, having these kind of conversations and interesting conversations to learn from the people I talk to, right? That's just exactly what you did these past couple of years, right? It's so great. To go back a bit, so you came from the UK, right? Or you were born there, and then you went to Singapore for your first job.
Correct.
How was that?
Well, I started my first job in London at the age of 19. Finally managed to escape from academia, which was God damn, thank God I never went to university. I just was not cut out for that. I just wanted to start working somehow. Just wanted to start earning money and have my own, responsibilities, and just not be bound to a textbook anymore that we'd, been suffering through since the age of 5. So I was lucky enough that I'd done an internship the year prior. So when I was 18, I'd done an internship on a foreign exchange desk in London. It was on the spot dollar mark desk. And spot means you are trading right there, then settled, the deal's done. There's no futures or derivatives. It was just spot, on the spot. That's what it meant. And dollar against marks was the busiest market by far against any of the other trading currency pairs. And the environment was electric. And I spent 2 weeks up there doing my internship, built some good relationships with the guys on the desk. I'd earned their trust. And all I had to do was go and get their breakfasts, their lunches, their sandwiches, I was just a dog's body.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the banter, and I could see that these guys, if they really worked hard for 10 to 15 years, they could make some good wedge if they saved it and could probably be in a pretty good position. And that was a very interesting prospect for me. So another year goes by, and I get released from my A-levels after sixth form college, and get in contact with them again. In fact, they reached out. They'd just lost their trainee, and they reached out to my dad, who was in the same kind of business, and asked, is Dan available? Because we need someone on the quick. I'm like, yeah, I'll be up there Monday morning. Let's go. So that's how I got my first job, and just stuck with it. And I was there from 1995, and then in 1999, I moved across to Singapore. That's when we both moved across. My now wife and I, she was my girlfriend at the time, from the same town. We packed a bag each. We left our respective parents' homes, flew halfway across the world to start a new life in Singapore. And that was, these decisions you make in your life, the forks in the road, that was definitely, I guess there's no right or wrong, but looking back, a brilliant decision. We had the most incredible 15 years in Singapore. We saw the country change a lot over the time that we were there. We had all 4 of our kids there, made some incredible friends from all around the world who we're still in touch with. And it was all going really well for especially the beginning. But then over time, like anything, everything just becomes a grind, right? You kind of hit that glass ceiling in your position. You see all the nonsense that's going on around you. Questions started creeping into me like, what are we doing with all this money? How do I sit here and broker a deal on $100 million against yen between UBS and RBS? Where does that money go, and for what reason? But you didn't have time to think about it because it's fast-paced business and, bang, 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 bang. You're on the hamster wheel. You've got to get a commission in. If you don't, then there's a target on your back. You'll be out the door. And if you don't, then, you're going to lose the respect that you've built up amongst your peers and your network. And you've got your wife and kids at home. And you've got to bring in the bacon, right? Yeah. But then I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek. And everything started unraveling in my mind. All of the nagging doubts were actually put right up in front of me. And they were real doubts. They were like, I cannot sit here for another 10 to 15 years doing this. There's just no way. Either I burn out or I get fired before that 10 to 15 years is up, just because that's the nature of the business. And my wife and my kids, they're at home. I'm a lodger in my own house. I see them barely at the weekends. This isn't life. I'm living a deferred lifestyle. So that's when everything started changing for us and putting into place different path. Let's put it that way, which led us to led to me quitting the business and us leaving Singapore and started to travel long term with the kids. And, we did that for 2.5 years. But I'll stop there. I think I've answered your first question. But
I wanted to go there for sure. No, that's super interesting. I mean, I've also spent some time in the UK and London as well. And I've always had older friends, luckily, right? Because I was also on the path to go into finance. And they always said, don't do that. You have no life, right? And then I met the bosses of my friends that were already working, in their 40s and like VPs and stuff like that. And then they said, yeah, I have a wife, but I see her like literally 1 hour on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Right? She's also in finance, and we cross paths on a Sunday for 1 hour. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yep.
It dawned on me, and then like you go clubbing, right? And like you meet a hedge fund guy in the, in front of the club, like smoking or whatever. And they all love what they do, but they say, it just crashes you. Like your whole health goes down the drain, and like all these things that you don't think about when you're like 20, when you're 21, just living life basically, right? Going to uni, working a little bit, and like just partying, right? And then you think about that, and that kind of, back then showed me that it's probably the wrong path, because I kind of felt that it's the truth, right? Like I've always had that feeling. So you said, it's the absolute staple, the 4-hour work week, right? Like everybody should read it, I guess. What's still valid and relevant to you from that book, like today?
To not fall into the trap. There's a quote in there which I even put in my book, which really hit home to me when I was reading it, and it goes something like, enough is enough. The blind quest for money is a fool's errand. Time is the ultimate currency. Something like that. And then, when you look back now and what we understand about Bitcoin and time, you're like, wow, yes, Tim nailed it. Like, time is the ultimate currency. And I remember thinking when I read that, like, yeah, all I've done for the last 20 odd years is just chase blindly after money at 100 miles an hour as
and trade
fast
time
as
for
I
it.
could. Yeah, right. And as we know now, it is a fool's errand, because that money is designed to lose its purchasing power over time. Therefore, time is the ultimate currency. And it was really an eye-opening point for me in the book, and it came early on in the book, and then everything else that he was talking about, like I'd been chained to a desk as well. My job had been deemed, you weren't able to work from home in that environment. It was like, no, everybody needs to be at the desk, at the table by 6:30 a.m. And if you're not, you're going to get fined, right? You're buying lunch for everybody if you're like a minute late and all of this. And you don't leave the desk until 5:30. There were no lunch breaks or anything like that. You had breakfast at your desk, You had lunch at your desk, and we had people that would run down to the shops, food shops, to get us all of that as well. So yeah, literally you are sacrificing your health because you're sat in a chair for 10, 11 hours a day. My back was fucked. My neck was fucked. I was way overweight because you're just sitting there doing nothing. Stressed to all hell because it's a fast-paced moving business, and you've got your boss and your colleagues breathing down your neck, and it's all competition against like the other brokerage houses that are out there. You've got to win the business because it's a zero-sum game. If the other broker wins that $100 million deal, then you didn't win it. Like, you get zero. That's it. And you're an asshole in the eyes of your boss, right? So it was when reading the book and seeing Tim's view on life of being able to be location independent was really eye-opening to me, like very like shattering. It was so you're telling me this guy has designed a life in a way that he can still be very efficient, very successful in air quotes, because define success, and live his life on his terms, when he wants, how he wants. Like, how does someone else do that? And I just kept reading the book, and I remember getting to the end of it, and I was reading passages to my wife. Listen to this. And I would read it on the train to work, and then I would read it. I would just be sneaking. It would be on my desk, and I'd be reading it in quiet moments. And then whenever I could, and I read the book about 5 times in about 4 months, because I just kept going back and reading through it again, and then again, and then again, to get the confidence to build up to something that was going to be a huge change in our lives. And I think the most actionable point out of the whole book for me which I write about in my book as well, because it did unlock a lot of things, was the fear setting exercise instead of a goal setting exercise. And self-help gurus will tell you all of this stuff all the time. You've got to have goals, you've got to set this, and you've got to achieve, and you've got to get motivated, and you've got to do those 100 push-ups in the morning before you even get to work, and all of this kind of nonsense that anybody can spout. And what Tim did was turn it on his head, and I really enjoyed that. Like, no, do a fear-setting exercise. Write down your 10 biggest fears that is stopping you live the life that you want to live. So right, I knew I wanted to leave the business. I knew we wanted to go traveling. And I knew I wanted to create some alternative way of earning money and location independent. What was the fear stopping me? And it was like, well, I'm going to go bankrupt and end up living under a bridge and a complete failure in the eyes of my wife and my family. Like, bam, that was it. Like that was literally what was keeping me awake at night and not pushing forward with this whole, dream of quitting and living life on my own terms. So when you write that fear down, and the idea being, well, what steps would you put into place? Like, put yourself there in your mind. Like, you actually, right, sorry guys, we're going to have to camp out under a bridge tomorrow night because we're done. I've lost all the money. It's all gone. We've got nothing over our heads tomorrow. Like, what would you actually do? And like, well, first thing is you pick up your fucking phone to your family, right? And then it's like, okay, well, my parents have many spare bedrooms because they live alone. So did Claire's. And then we had 2 brothers each. So that's 4 brothers between us that also have spare bedrooms. I'm like, okay. Well, we wouldn't be ever in the situation where we'd be homeless. All we've got to do is, call them. They'd wire the money. We'd be on a plane, wherever. We'd have hot food in our bellies. And then what? Well, then I would call my ex-colleagues, my network, and I would figure out if there's a spare seat somewhere and I could get back in a job and be earning I'm like, okay, fine. But that irrational fear was then just gone, completely melted. And you can do that with 4 or 5 different points. And once you actually face it and write it down and look at it, you realize that it's your monkey mind again. And I love Naval Ravikant had a quote about your monkey mind. It's like the monkey in there is just running around, banging pots and pans, throwing shit against the wall. It's you've got to just you have to grab it sometimes by the neck, the scruff of the neck, and just sit it in the corner. No, shut up, I'm in charge here. Yeah. And that was really kind of, that's when I could actually start thinking properly, when I'd gone through that fear setting exercise. And then realizing once you do rip off the Band-Aid and you quit your job and whatever else and blah, 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 you can have all of these different fear sets and difficult conversations to have along the line. Your boss is going to go, what are you talking about? What, you're quitting? Yeah. But it's going so well. You've been doing this for so long. The next thing
options.
Could be, you're right. Exactly. Yeah. What can we do to make you stay? And you're like, oh God, that's the worst, right? As soon as you quit, then you're offered a raise in a higher position. You're like, huh? What? Where? That's coming now because I'm holding you over a barrel. This isn't part of the conversation. I'm not holding you over the barrel. I'm telling you, I'm going. I'm changing my life. Yeah. So there's all these other bits and pieces that come, and friends what are you doing? You can't do this. Why not? Well, you got kids. You got kids, man. You cannot take your kids out of school. Are you crazy? This is completely irresponsible. These are really tough things. These are really tough conversations.
So can relate to that.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I have a son as well. And, I think about these topics a lot, especially homeschooling and unschooling or whatever you want to call it, right?
How old is he now?
He's 3.
Right.
Yeah. So we have, it's all good so far. But yeah, Germany is crazy. So, since I like to look ahead now a bit more than before.
Germany, man, is...
said this is impossible. I don't want to deal with this, when the time is right or when the time is, when it's happening. Better deal with it now and see what happens. But yeah, it's crazy.
The dark history of Germany and homeschooling is that it was perfectly acceptable all the way up until 1938, when all of a sudden it was outlawed by Hitler and Goebbels signed. I'm like, what? When you learn that fact, you're like, holy shit, wow. So how has that never been repealed?
It's the same system still.
Yes,
it looks the exact same. It's almost the same subjects. So my grandma's mother, she was alive, up until maybe 15 years ago. So I had some time to talk to her. So she survived, or she lived through both of the world wars. And I talked to her about these kind of topics, right? And sure, they had sticks before, and like if you wouldn't listen, you would get slapped on the fingers and stuff. And even I think when my dad was in primary school, they said I had that, but like the system, it was exactly the same. Exactly the same. And I mean, that's when you should think about, okay, what are you actually doing here? Like what's going on? And for me, I mean, I had like my school years were like horrible, like I had maybe like 3 pedagogues in the whole like 10 years of school. And then I went to the UK, luckily, because I wouldn't have finished school in Germany. Like they would have kicked me out because I needed more stuff to do. Right, like I asked questions. So why the fuck are you asking questions about history? Like, can you see history in the book? Like this is the real history here. I'm like, no, it doesn't match with what I hear from Croatia. Like what went on there. Like I talked to my friends there. It doesn't match up. Like tell me what really went on, and get in trouble for that, and like get kicked out, and bad grades for that, all that kind of stuff. So how did you guys handle this whole homeschooling, unschooling phase?
Wow, rabbit hole that. Because I'd never questioned the education system up until that point, even though now I've gone completely 180 on it. When I look back at my own experience going through that indoctrination camp and the way that they, they've psyoped the whole world into believing that the only way you can ever socialize or get a job is if you go through 15 years of hell in a government institution, gulag, being, force-fed their narratives. It blows me away. But I would never have come to this realization if we hadn't have taken the kids out of school. And they were all in a fine, nice, very expensive international school at the time. Well, actually, so they were, but then we switched them out into a local state school because it was just crippling expense in the international school. And then when you're like, oh my goodness, Singaporean national schools, like state schools, you'd have to have the kids there by 7:15, 7:20, something like that. The national anthem went off at 7:30, piped across the whole building and the playground. And if you were walking across the playground to get to class and the national anthem came on, you had to stand still. Even if it was raining. You're like, my God, like no wonder. Like the local Singaporeans are so, you have a nation there of box tickers, let's put it that way. And then you can see it. Now I understand. Like the end result, because I've seen where this all begins. Because they sort the kids at the age of 7 or 8 by their math grade. They have some math test, and then they have an English test, and then they have something else. And whatever you score in math is where you end up in the strata. And that's pretty much where you're going to be set for life. And it's just absolutely amazing. So I'd seen that. And then when we left and the education was on us, and I started reading all of the books and looking into different families that were world schooling or unschooling, reading their blogs, what were they doing, what were other people doing. Sir Ken Robinson was very influential. Watching his TED Talks back in the day, what book was out? Finding Your Element. That was one of his books. Finding Peter Gray, and finding his book Free to Learn. And just falling down all of these different rabbit holes, when you spoke to and met up with other world schooling families, they would give you another resource. It's like, oh, have you read this? Or have you seen this video? Or, bam, bam, bam. And it would just reinforce everything that we were doing. Of course, we always have worries, even now, still today. It's like, are we doing the same thing? Are we doing the right thing? But that's a parent, right? That is you're always going to be questioning yourself about whether you've done the right thing. Even those people that just send their kids to the local school are going to be questioning themselves. Should we take them out of school and try and get them into a better school in a better area? And should we move house to do that? There's always this nagging doubt over your head whether you're doing the best thing for your kids. That never goes away. But I've come to realize that we are, just by virtue of the fact we are protecting them from a system that is designed to crush any creativity, any unique ability, to crush any love of learning, and to make everybody feel the same. I mean, look at the UK. I don't know what it's like in Germany, but in the UK, you have to wear a school uniform. Like whatever school you go to, you have to look the same. And you are all put into a little battalion of 30, whether you like it or not, with 29 other strangers, all looking the same, all the same age, and you're all going to move to different classes all at the same time, sit down together, stand up together, shut up together, read the same books together. Like, it's absolutely nuts. There's absolutely no room for your own, inquisitive, intelligent mind to wander. That is absolutely not allowed.
Gets punished.
Even. Yeah. Like you said, you asked a question.
Yeah.
You asked a question. No, stop asking that question. Sit down, please. Shut up. You're disturbing the class.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, that teacher's just as captured in the system. That teacher doesn't mean to be nasty, but that teacher has all kinds of administrative bullshit hanging over their heads. They have career risk hanging over their heads. They need all of you guys to pass. So the last thing he needs is somebody in the classroom raising hands and slowing him down, because he's got to teach to a certain speed as well. And don't forget, he might be a 40-year-old history teacher. He's been at school since the age of 3 or 5. He never left this system. Yeah. Like, you have somebody that is completely and utterly, totally dependent on this system, and has had their mind completely crafted by it as well. So the teachers are just as trapped as the kids, but the kids, shit rolls downhill. So the kids are the ones that bear the brunt. And look at the disgusting statistics of, and John Taylor Gatto talks about this in The Underground History of the American Education System, how literacy rates have dropped through the floor. School is not helping kids learn to read. And not only that, it's not even really, it turns them against subjects such as math. Yeah. Most kids hate math because of the way it's taught. But it's taught in such a way that it's going to confuse the absolute shit out of you from a very early age. So you just turn off to it. Because why? Well, we can't have all of these beautiful mathematicians walking around. Surely not. Think of the shit that they could think up. Think of the companies that they could start and the entrepreneurial pursuits. And math is truth. We can't have truth being understood, right? So all of this gets completely muddied in the waters. And John Taylor Gatto, again, he talks about this. He was a trained teacher for 30 years. Well, the way he was trained, like all teachers are trained in the US, is he calls it the 6 or 7 things I teach, or something like that. Number 1 is confusion. It's like the number one thing that we are taught to do is confuse. Yeah. And that is why at the age of 11, when you get to big boy school or big girl school, you've got this timetable. So you never own your time, back to time being the ultimate currency, right? Someone's owning it for you. You're being told where to be at what time and what to sit down and listen to. And 9 a.m. is physics. 10 a.m. is geography. 11 a.m. is history. then there's a short break. Then 1 p.m., we're going to be learning about the planets and different star signs. And then we're going to end the day with some, maybe a bit of physical education or something like that. You get home fucked, man, because like that's a shit ton of information
and the
that you've crammed into an 11-year-old. Right? Yeah, and then you got 4 days left of that before you can get to the weekend where you've got to cram in all the homework and shit that you've been given. And like you said, it is a narrative that is pushed down. They're not going to give you the truth. And where does this curriculum come from? The curriculum doesn't come from, the history teacher themselves. Yeah. No, it comes from the Ministry of Education, which gets pushed down. These policies get pushed down. So I like to point out to people that, that they're not curriculums, they're agendas. All of them. Every single one of them is an agenda to make you believe a certain thing and behave in a certain way. So when I look at, with my wife and I, are we doing the right thing for our kids? It's like a great big fucking tick in the yes box because we're protecting them from that. I mean, yeah, sure, there might be other things that they could take away from that system. Maybe they would find some interesting people there that they could, call their friends in 5 or 6 years when they're actually out of that system. Because when you're in it, you're not making friends. You're finding comrades just to get through the bullshit. And this is forced association. It's not socialization. You're forced there, and you have to find. You're naturally drawn to those people that kind of share the same kind of values as you. But like the other 28 people in that classroom, you're like, how did I get stuck with these assholes, right? Because no one can be themselves. They could be perfectly nice, and in a different situation, you might have the best of times. But nobody can be themselves in that setting. Everyone's wearing a mask, and everyone's competing. You're forced to compete against each other rather than collaborate with each other as well. So the whole thing, people say the education system is broken. It's not. It's working by design. Perfectly by design, and you can't change it because, as Jeff Booth would say, you cannot change a system from within the system. So we need a parallel system, and a parallel system is just break away from that and start your own little homeschool group or get on an online self-directed education platform where the kids can interact with other kids from around the world and Zoom calls with a facilitator. These things exist. It's just being cognizant that they're out there and knowing that you have a choice. But some countries you don't have this choice, Germany being one of them, Sweden another, Holland another. They're trying to make it more difficult in France. Wake up, people. Why? Why are they trying to entrap your children? Why do they want your children from the age of 3, 4, or 5? This is vile. This is an attack on the family because they take the kids away from their mothers at a very early age. And there's all kinds of psychological studies that have been done about this. So if anybody, after listening to this little rant, is having a, rolling their eyes, I would point you towards some resources. Naomi Fisher has written a book called Changing Our Minds. She is a clinical child psychologist. Peter Gray is a psychologist. Dr. Gabor Mate is a clinical psychologist. These guys have all written books. Naomi, Changing Our Minds. Gabor Mate, Hold On to Your Kids. And Peter Gray, Free to Learn. Pick up any one of those books or just look at a TED Talk from any single one of them and start going down the rabbit hole of what is psychologically happening to our kids and what has happened to us, more importantly, when we went through it, because we are still carrying baggage from that 15-year sentence. We all are. And it's something that needs addressing. And it's my hope that aided with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin being a parallel system to the financial legacy system, homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling, self-directed education is a parallel system to the current education system. And we don't We get tricked as well into believing we need these certificates to get anywhere in life. Please remember who gives you these certificates. Yeah. They are self-ordained to give you a certificate. Like, this makes no sense. They get to write the rules. They are the ones that give you their training so you can get their certificate. Like, they self-ordained themselves to give these certificates out. Like, the whole thing's a sham. Yeah. And in the meantime, we have lost 2 or 3 generations worth of, where could we be, Max? Like, you know, if we hadn't have been locked up in these classrooms, all of us, for 15 years, and all of this nonsense shoved down our necks, and all of this kind of psychological bullshit and mental bullying that happens in that system by design as well, where could we be? Like, where could we be if that person that just wanted to play the guitar, the piano, or sing all day had the ability to do that? Where could we be if that person that just wanted to go and play football for 10 hours a day, where would our sports be? You know, where could we be with philosophy? The kid that just wanted to look out the window all day for 10 years, you know, he was thinking about something. That was probably you, right? I'm sure you were looking out the window, told off. You weren't looking out the window because you were bored. You were looking out the window because you're thinking about something. You're trying to put something together. So if that person could just go and lay on a grassy hill and look at the clouds and think where would we be philosophically?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I remember in 5th grade, you know, we were like, I was pushing like one of these fast tracks. And, you know, with these gifted kids, right, that jumped like 2 classes in primary school and this kind of stuff, right? I was with
another
them.
psyop.
Yeah. And we were competing against other schools in like programming little robots with like infrared and front, like that, to like run a parkour and stuff, right? Like, that was like the last time I think I did something that I was really interested in, like in high school.
Yep.
Right. And then that was just
under the guise of you are gifted.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you're super stressed, like you have to do everything double as fast, you know, because like you basically you're supposed to finish school 1 year earlier, right? Like, you know, in comparison to everybody else. And that was the last time.
And you're forced to compete, right? Rather than collaborate.
Competition, yeah. You had your team, right? But then I also remember that I was supposed to be with, you know, my friend in class, but we were the two, like, you know, we understood how to do that. So they separated us. They put us in 2 different teams, so we were competing against each other, because otherwise everybody would have lost, right? So exactly what you said, like it's like it goes completely against, you know, the entrepreneurial setup, right? Like, you're not supposed to think outside the box. You're not supposed to think anything that, you know, is new. You're not supposed to collaborate. There's only one way to the goal, right? You know, like, that's how you lose in real life, you know, if you go by these rules. So, it's absolutely crazy. Just to what you said before, are there any negatives that you notice with your children about, you know, homeschooling, that kind of stuff? Is there anything negative that you found?
Most people would say, exposure to other kids. But I see that as a positive, because it's such a toxic atmosphere, and I don't want them to be part of that toxic atmosphere. And they get exposure to other kids through their hobbies, you know, their actual interests. This today is, you know, football for my son and horse riding for my daughters. And when I take my daughters to horse riding, there's a golf course nearby, and I can go and play 9 holes. So I get my what's the word I'm looking for? Hobby. Yeah, I get my hobby to go and enjoy as well. And then they get to hang out with people of all ages. So in the riding classes, there's a mix. You know, they're from the age of 8 all the way up to, you know, 50. And everybody's learning, and they're all interacting with the animals, and, you know, the younger ones are getting helped by the older ones. And there's it's great. I love going over there and dropping them off and seeing them just walk away as I pull out. Because I know they're going to have the most amazing next 3 hours. So socialization wise, which is the big one people can't get over, how are your kids ever going to socialize if they don't go to school? Like I said, that is a forced association. That is not a social setting. It's not a social setting if you're forced to sit down and be quiet and you're not allowed to speak with your friends or collaborate with your friends like you were just explaining. But when you drop them off at football, like my son, he loves his football and, you know, he gets to collaborate with his teammates. You know, they're out there, they're training, they're working towards something together. You've got to come together as a team and, you know, try and come up with new tactics and moves and whatever else and elevate each other. So he'll do that on a Wednesday or Friday. Then there's a match on Saturday, and then they meet up in the park on a Sunday. That's a shit ton of socialization, you know, like actual socialization. So I don't anything negative. No, but I'm thinking now perhaps the, you know, exposure to pedagogues or mentors, but we do that anyway.
Yeah.
You know, they have in-person lessons, or we have, we've got a Bitcoiner math teacher. I'm trying to set up with Ben Weeks and Nathan Day. You know, these are other homeschooling families, Bitcoiners. Like, how do we bring the Bitcoin community together and get people on a Zoom call teaching the kids about different things in life, you know? So that'd be a cool thing to do. I get the opportunity to take them to conferences because they're not in school. And then once they get to these conferences, they get to see some of the speakers and they get to interact with the people and they become their friends, you know? Every time they see Canute, they just run up and give him a big hug. Or Joe Hall, you know, Joe Nakamoto. You met them as well at the Einens Vonsvig meetup in the Princess Hotel. This is something that to me is important, that they get to meet and see how adults actually you know, operate in the world.
Yeah,
exactly.
but like actual people that, you know, think.
Exactly.
You know,
and
that's I think is the difference, right? Like, you know, when I speak for myself, like I wouldn't want my son to be taught by someone that hasn't actually done anything in the real world. You know, like for me, that's the worst thing. Like I remember all the way until masters, I would say I haven't had like any teacher that actually, you know, operated in the field, right? Like then I had like corporate finance, you know, and that guy actually had a company and he was, you know, like the professor there because he wanted to pull out people, you know, for his company, right? Like that was his goal kind of. But up until then, they were all just academics, right? Like in Germany, especially, like you're not a pedagogue, rather you want to save pension because you're government employed.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly that.
Which is so fucking crazy.
Yeah,
and people don't think about that.
No, people go to university to study like a master's, an MBA, or just like a business studies course or marketing. I'm like, all right, okay, who's teaching that? Because those those who can't do teach, right? Like, you know, what that business professor, what business did he run? What was his like? Because like if he was a successful business owner, he'd be running that business.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd be more than happy, or she'd be more than happy to have interns come through, get a close look and have them learn on the job. That is a brilliant way to teach. But to have 18 to 22-year-olds in a lecture hall telling them, if you just follow this model, you'll have a successful business and we'll give you an MBA at the end of it. Like, again, self-ordained to give you a certificate that says you can run a business. This is retarded.
Yeah, there's maybe 5% of those, I would say, as per usual. You know, there's always 5% that do stuff differently and, like, you know, are self-taught and this kind of stuff. You know, I'm sure there's a couple professors that, you know, put away like 2 or 3 hours a week and actually want to teach because they like it, you know, because they want to give back. But it's just a few that also operate in the real world, like, for sure.
Yep.
Crazy stuff. Okay, let's get to your book a little bit. You know, here it is.
Yeah.
Choose Life. How long did you take to put that together? Was that a lot of thought process and then you just sat down and wrote it, or?
Yeah, I'd kept a blog going since the day we left. just to keep friends and family updated of where we were, where we were and what we were doing. And I thought perhaps one day I might get sponsors on the blog or whatever. It could have been one of those Tim Ferriss type things that, if you attract an audience, then you might be able to. So right, that was the thought process. So that kept me honest with, writing. I would try and do it every week and release a blog post of what we've been doing, what we'd learned, where we'd been, home swapping, trying to, get people open their minds to the idea that there's a different way to travel.
Yeah, what is that?
Homeschooling. What's home swapping?
Explain it to people, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's where you will exchange your house to go and stay in somebody else's house. So people might be familiar with that Cameron Diaz film, The Holiday. It's basically that. In fact, Love Home Swap was founded on the back of that film by Debbie Waskow. She's now sold the company, and it's now been taken over by Home Exchange, which is a much bigger site. So, yeah, you just list your property. It could be your actual home. It could be your second home if you had a vacation home. It could be like your 1-bedroom flat. It could be your 5-bedroom, suburban house. It doesn't matter. Some people have even listed their camper vans. Others have even listed their boats. They might have a little sailboat that they use to live on, or houseboat. Some people live on canals. The whole gambit is there. And the idea being that you're willing to swap your house in exchange to go and explore another part of the world. So we listed ours. I bought a house on a small island in Thailand called Koh Samui 18 years ago.
Wow.
And we put that on the website. I said, yeah, look, here's the place. We'd be happy to swap if anybody's interested. And before we knew it, people were like, yeah, I live in Bulgaria. We live in Sweden. We live here. I'm like, holy shit. These are countries we never thought of ever going to. So it opens your mind to different opportunities. And then you just you start reaching out yourself to other people. So we knew where we were and where we wanted to go, roughly as an itinerary, the countries we wanted to hit. We wanted to really do a few months in Australia, 3 months in New Zealand, because this might be the last time that we ever get the chance to do that. And whilst we're this part of the world, let's go and see these areas. And we managed to do it, like 5 months in each of those countries. And I think we home swapped or we exchanged work through HelpX we were using for accommodation the whole time. Amazing experiences. And it completely opens up your opportunities to travel and explore those areas in which you are visiting. A lot of the time, you get to meet the people that you're swapping with. And there's another way you can do it as well. There's a point system within the website. So if I want to go and use this house in Sydney, but they are not there, the house is open, but they can't or don't want to go to Thailand, I can give them points that I've accrued by letting people stay in mine. So you've got two ways of doing it.
Nice.
Or you could do it non-simultaneous. You could go to their place in December and they might go back to your place in July. It's very, very flexible. Mm-hmm. And you suddenly realize, holy shit, here's a group of people who are very like-minded, who are more than willing to share their most prized possession, i.e. their house, and sometimes even their cars, when you're staying there, with total strangers. And you're like, this is such a restored faith in humanity. I did not know these people existed. Like, this is absolutely crazy. And right now, just yesterday, because we still do it, this is how still to this day, we travel. Even when we were in Lugano, we home swapped. We were in Prague for a conference, we home swapped. So the Lugano conference, we found a home swap in Managio, which is 40 minutes away from Lugano. We'd just drive into and out of the conference each day. But we had this incredible house on Lake Como.
So where are you at right now?
Right now we're at home in France, where we're based. Then our next adventures are being crafted at the moment. So we've got a few UK swaps to do. coming up next year. We're going to get across to Madeira next March for the conference over in Madeira. And then, we might be looking into, we'd love to get to El Salvador, of course, and South Central America and do that whole part of the world. So we'll start looking into home swaps there as well. And there are opportunities in all of these countries. Yeah. And it's just absolutely amazing. And I was speaking again with Ben Weeks the other day, and he's just read the book, him and his wife, and want to take the kids to conferences as well. They're going to start looking into this home swapping idea. So it's, I hope it opens up people's minds to, and if you don't want to home swap it, you could even Airbnb it, and then you're making money. So, there's just different ways to look at travel and to, get on the move and get out there.
Yeah, it's the same thing as we talked about in the schooling system, right? It's cooperation versus, whatever else on the other side of the spectrum. Right. Yep.
and there's a built-in trust with it. Once you've done it a few times, right, and you understand like, all right, like this whole community, it's like Bitcoin community, there's a built-in trust there. It's weird, right? We say, don't trust, verify. But invariably with Bitcoiners, as soon as you meet a Bitcoiner, you have my trust. It's up to you now to lose it. Like, I guess that's the verification process. But it's the same with the home swapping crowd, which is, great to see, because one thing people are like, oh, but what if they're going to wreck your house or steal your shit or go through your drawers and stuff like that? Like, well, people are generally good. Yeah. I don't think they're going to steal your TV.
And then go on the ferry to Koh Samui or to Phuket or whatever. Yeah, it's crazy. I visited those places like 10 years ago. Did a small tour back then. Quit my masters and just took the backpack and went on a little run and ended up in Colombia in the end. Was living there for a while and then went to Spain, and that was kind of the move back to Europe. But I think it's important to get around, and that's what I love about what you do with your family, because like I literally learned so much from these interactions back then, and it kind of gave me a new path, a new understanding of what life is about, how stuff actually works, right? Like how the other side, how people live that don't have as much as I do. Or like live on the streets, like you've been to India, when you see what's going on there, or Sri Lanka, and all these places which are super, super beautiful, but they have their downside with it. Like, what were the most challenging moments that you had, like in those 2.5 years that you did a little world tour? Like, you still remember? Like, was there anything that stood out?
Yeah. The accidents are always going to happen, right? Especially if there's 6 of you. And my son split his head open when we were in Chiang Mai on the side of a swimming pool, just running around playing, and then down, and like his forehead just opened up, and like you're like, oh my God, like what the hell? And again, you lean on the local people who have the local knowledge. We were staying in a little kind of bed-sit homestay type thing, which was, funny enough, one of the very few places that we found it difficult to home swap. So we were actually paying for accommodation. But we'd made very good friends with the owner, and his wife was French and he was Thai. And I just went running through the place, yelling his name, and he came out of like nowhere. He's like, Daniel, what's up? I'm like, dude, look at this. He's like, oh shit, right. Get to the front right now. I'll meet you around in the car. And, he had us at the hospital within 20 minutes. He stayed with us the whole way. He translated the whole thing. And it was just great that, when humans want to help other humans. That is our inbuilt default nature. And it gets beaten out of you, or you get to, you're taught to believe that everybody else is your enemy, and, stranger danger and all of this kind of stuff. So when you find yourself in these really difficult situations and humanity like shows itself in full force, He was there the whole time, even when we went in to stitch him up. He wouldn't leave my side to make sure that any translation that needed doing or any consultation, because he had worked as a medic in the army, 20 years beforehand. So he knew what he was actually talking about. And he advised me, no, don't stay in overnight, because the doctor was like, we should keep him in overnight and, monitor him. And this guy was like, nope, let's get him stitched up. Let's get him home. That will be too much trauma. I'm like, okay, no. But without him by my side, I would have just followed the doctor's orders, right? So that was certainly difficult. What else stood out? Just general travel, mishaps, like missing a bus, being late. Stuff. Yeah, just normal stuff. That at the time is the biggest fuck up in the world. Yeah, and you can't stop. But
meaningless.
Whatever.
Yeah.
At the end is nothing.
Yeah, it's true. So, when I think back to my situations that happened like that, it's always the locals. That they were always there, right? If you needed help, they would always help. Yep. Like I had a situation when actually in Colombia, we we were working and we're in an industry area, and we were on the way to the airport, but we had a meeting beforehand, and all the stuff was in the car, right? Literally everything in the trunk, closed trunk. So we finished with the meeting, go to the airport, arrive to the airport, open up the trunk, it's empty, right? Everything's stolen, the whole thing, all the passports and the laptop, from my girlfriend at the time, also all the chargers, once you lost your chargers in South America, it's such a pain in the ass. So yeah, you have to go to police, and then they think you sold it, right? Because Colombia is a country that, for identity theft, it's one of those where actually a lot of people go and sell their passport, right? And you get good money for it apparently. But so they look at you like, did you do it, and all this kind of shit. But yeah, and then also they treat you the same when you come back to Europe later on, what happened to that passport, all these questions and stuff. But yeah, the locals were there; they would always help out, and that's that's the crucial part. With traveling, it restores faith in humanity. You lose so much of it beforehand in school and university or whatever. But these moments, they show you, right? Just like you said, people want to help you. It's definitely that. Yeah. Yeah,
100%. That was the biggest takeaway from the whole trip, was the restored faith in humanity and the way that people would do anything to help you. I remember getting on a bus in Italy, and we'd got on, and the kids were still very small, 4 years old. And this old Italian lady just looked down and looked at my son, and there were no seats. And so she just picked him up and put him on her lap and just started jabbering away in Italian, because she just thought we were an Italian family, I suppose. And he just sat there just happy as Larry, looking out the window, just letting her talk. And it was wow, that's a beautiful thing. If she'd have done that in the US or the UK or something, you'd have had some Karen mother, you don't touch my son like that, or you going fucking crazy. It's just such a, that's how society has been shaped.
Yeah.
But if you just, if you let go of all that conditioning and put yourself out there, you will soon find out that people are wonderful and they are programmed to help you. And everyone's got a story. Everyone's so interesting. Another thing about the podcast, everyone's story is so interesting. It's okay, great. Yeah, let's bring you on and talk about the book and whatever else. Or, but what did you do growing up? Where did you live? What were your parents doing?
Yeah.
How did you end up doing this?
And what molded you, right? That's exactly what I also want to understand. Who's the human behind the project, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Super interesting. Okay, when we're already talking about the podcast, right? It's called the Once Bitten Podcast. Guys, if you want to check it out, it's great. Very BTC based, right?
Yeah. How Bitcoin.
How did that come about? That you chose a very niche.
Yeah, just being in the Bitcoin space for a long time. And realized that I wanted to just do a Bitcoin only podcast and bring on with the intent of helping people understand like the homeschooling aspect. So I've had a lot of like those guests, those people I just mentioned. Naomi's been on the show talking about child psychology and homeschooling. So has Peter Gray. So has Sir Ken Robinson before he passed. I've had Corey DeAngelis on recently. I've got Anna Fabrega, who's from Synthesis School and has just written her book as well. To bring these people on and give their stories. So Bitcoin, because Bitcoiners are homeschoolers that just don't know it yet, and homeschoolers are Bitcoiners that just don't know it yet. If you've separated education from state, you will separate money from state and vice versa. They just go hand in hand. And there's no stopping that. So the sooner we can move toward that, the better. So I like to play my role in both of those areas. That's why I started the podcast. I just wanted to get as much information out there as I possibly could about those two specific subjects and give more of a human voice to people around the world. I mean, yes, I've had like the so-called big names on the podcast, but man, like, you know, I've interviewed everybody from the pleb that's never been on Twitter and nobody's ever heard of to the pleb that's got 350 Twitter followers, but just is dying to share something, all the way up to like, you know, and everybody in between. And that's the shtick of the show. It's like interview as many people as you can from around the world who have had their life or their mind changed in some way by Bitcoin and how they're using it and why, and to try and touch as many people as I possibly can. You know, it will resonate. One of these stories will resonate with at least one other listener, and then we have one extra person on the network. So its number of people go up. That's all that matters. Yeah. Doesn't matter. Number of dollars go up. Doesn't matter. They're always going to go up. If you're printing infinite amounts of money into the system, euros, like the price of Bitcoin against euro is always going to go up. Is always going to go up because you've got one asset which is finite and another which is infinite. So, like, you know, it's just basic. Yeah. Getting more people to understand that, getting them to understand the store of value and the way Bitcoin is going to protect them and their families for the future. The more that people understand that, the better. And you doing this podcast as well. You know, you've stepped up and you've started giving back, and you know, all the power to you, and thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, you talked about the list before, right? Like for me, talking in public is one of those, right? I never wanted to do it, especially I learned about all that crap, you know, the geopolitics, like way too early on, and I always wanted to talk about it, but you know, I knew if you do it, you know, it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
You're reading that book from the Fed book at the moment, right? What's called
The Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I learned about like, you know, money being debt very early on, right? Like, so it kind of makes you question everything after that point, right? Like, why do you trade your time for that monetary vehicle, whatever you're using, right? And they just keep printing, and they actually borrowed it, right, in the first place, right? And then you learn about interest and all these kind of things.
Yeah, learning about usury, and I'm probably going to write an article about this because usury, like, this is what we live under. We live under, actually, it's criminal what's going on. Somehow they've managed to legalize it for themselves. Again, these self-ordained people have written their own laws. But you look back in any of the ancient texts, any ancient religions, and it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, or any ancient laws, but the use of usury is criminal, immoral, unethical. And what is it? Well, it's when you loan money to somebody with the intent of charging them interest in an unfair manner. So, okay, let's look at any bank loan, any single bank loan, and mortgages obviously are the biggest one here. How was that money lent to you? Well, it was counterfeited. It's counterfeit money. that they charge you interest on. That's criminal. End of story.
Yeah. Could go down there. Could talk to you about that for a while, but yeah, maybe we should do a separate one on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My brain has already went down that rabbit hole now, but yeah, let's shoot something else. When did you first learn about like the real like Bitcoin? Like the actual benefits of it. Like storage of energy, right? Half-life, these kind of things.
Yeah, that's all come through the last 4 years, I would say.
So you were
thousands of it.
Yeah, so you were actually dealing with it for a while, and then you went deeper.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for a long time, it was just about number go up.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be able to sell this out for lots more euros, pounds, dollars, whatever. Then all of a sudden, there's a switch in my mind. Came for the money, stayed for the money. And it's like, no, I'm never switching this out. Like, unless I really have to, unless I need food on the table. But, as more and more merchants come online, this economy will grow. But yeah, the last 4 years of really doing, I was listening to so many hours of podcasts, 2018, 19, and that was, foundational. Then doing my own podcast, obviously huge. Then reading all of the books. The proof of work thing is crazy. Crazy simple. That's the thing. That's the thing about Bitcoin. It is crazy simple. Yeah. It's just intuition. It's like, you intuitively get it. It's like, all right, okay, hang on a second. So all of this fiat legacy system all over here with all the smoke and mirrors that nobody seems to understand, not even the professionals, or this thing over here that just holds its value stored over time. Because finite amount, hard cap, 21 million. Okay, like, bam. All right. And nobody can print it. No, nobody can control it. No. It's like, okay.
Makes sense.
I think I get it.
Yeah.
And I can own it. And it can be mine, and it can be self-custodied, and I have no counterparty risk. That all makes a lot more sense than anything else that we have going on over here in Clown World.
Yeah, it makes you think about theory of property, right? Like, like I've bought a bunch of land like these last couple of years. Just with the outlook of things, I think it's the right thing to do. And like if you think about that realm, right, property rights, Bitcoin, did you see any way to combine those? Like apart from just a transactional kind of thing, right? Is there do any ideas come to mind?
I don't, because private property laws all around the world are really freaking weird and shady. Like, do you actually own that land?
Yeah.
Do you actually own your house? Because if you're paying any kind of tax on that land or on that house, then it's not actually ours, is it? And again, who self-ordained themselves to sell you that land in the first place? Can we actually own a piece of the planet? All of this kind of stuff, and it gets really deeply philosophical very, very quickly. We could probably talk about for hours and hours on end.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's just just wanted to touch upon it, maybe, because I'm thinking about that a lot. Maybe you can talk about that, off the podcast as well at some point. I also think about CBDCs. Obviously, it's a big thing, especially here in Europe at the moment, and sure, everywhere around the world. But they just pushed it through, whilst everybody was, with their attention somewhere else. What a coincidence. How do you, does it worry you a lot? Do you see any way to get out of it?
It's coming. Bring it on. Almost like the sooner the better, because it's going to fail. Unfortunately, a lot of people will get rugged. A lot of people will get hurt. But then that will just wake them up quicker. It's almost like they're doing our job for us, like the central banks. I think I tweeted a day or two ago, if your whole recruitment and business model was to use bribery, blackmail, murder,
fear,
and inbreeding to build an empire, don't be surprised when that empire collapses in on itself. But just make sure you are out of the blast range, right? And Bitcoin is that shield. So they're going to do what we actually don't even need to do anything. Like the best thing we can do is just concentrate on Bitcoin, build the tools that we need, let them just completely and utterly, totally obliterate themselves. They're doing it day by day. You know, if you've surrounded yourself with ill-intended, criminally minded, easily bribable, unethical people, looking at Christine Lagarde straight away, I mean, you know, I can't imagine what depravity they have over her. I mean, they kept her out of jail right, after she was found guilty of laundering money at the IMF. And now she's just a sock puppet for the ECB doing their bidding. And she'll be put on the scrap heap when they're finished with her. You know, like the dude at the Augustus Carstens at the Bank of International Settlements. Look at that guy. I mean, you know, God knows what level of depravity they have hanging over his head. That
you don't get to these positions just like that, you know.
So
that's a big one. We can also
these people, they're destined to self-implode and fail, and they're going to take a lot of people down with them because a lot of people will believe in their central bank digital currencies because they haven't even considered that there could be another way of living. And that's what these pods are for, man. Like, that's what the books are for. And I think Bitcoiners have done an incredible job. As much as we're hard on ourselves, like, you know, we're not waking up enough people. We one at a time, just one at a time. That's all it's going to take. And then when it does start crumbling over there, we'll be ready. We're like, yeah, it's here. Like, here's all the literature. Here's all the podcasts. Here's all the YouTube videos. Here's all the tools. And they work. Just move across. Let's go. So, the CBDCs. Don't touch them. Anybody. I don't know how, like, you because what they'll do, the way I think they'll do it, is once they're ready to, they will just start converting people's bank accounts into it against your will. You won't have a choice. Like, download the app now, transfer, and you'll get this exchange rate. If you do it 2 months later, you'll get a lower exchange rate. 2 months later, you'll get a lower. So you'll be incentivized to do it as quickly as possible because you'll think you'll be getting more. A lot of people are going to fall into that trap. Yeah. A lot of people.
You talked about the skyscrapers, right? The office skyscrapers that feel like a jail, right? In your book, I think. I mean, yes. That's a mini test run, right? For a 15-minute city. Right? To think about it. There's everything there. You don't have to leave, right? Like, you know, now there's beds as well before they slept under the desk, but, you know.
Yeah. But, you know, people do that, right? They pull all-nighters and they sleep at their desk. They sleep at their place of work. And
crazy.
They can run down the next morning and buy a new shirt and get a shower in the office and they're good to go again. Like, it's dystopic. But, Max, I'm going to have to wrap up because we've got to get going. Unfortunately, I know we could talk for hours.
No, it's good, man. Thanks a lot for your time. It was great talking to you.
You're welcome. And thank you for, like I said before, thank you for doing this. Thank you for stepping up. Thank you for everything you're doing for Bitcoin.
Where can people find you?
On Twitter, if they want to reach out there, it's at Princey SOV. That stands for Store of Value. And then, come listen to the Once Bitten podcast if you've been interested by anything that we've spoken about today.
Perfect.
And we'll be around a lot of the conferences again next year. We're pretty easy to spot, generally followed around by 2 or 3 kids. I would say come and say hi.
Amazing. All right. Bye-bye.
All right, brother. Thank you.
That was great, man.